So a couple of things to think about. First of all, there's no rules about resumes other than it either gets the interview or it fails to get the interview. It's effective when it gets you the interview or that employer is interested in you. It's not effective when you don't. The only caveat to number one here is don't lie. Don't claim a degree that you don't have. Don't claim some skills that you don't have. Don't put numbers in that are false, because that is a disaster. If you get queried on that in your interview and you stumble, you're not going to get the offer. And if you get a job offer and they discover later that you lied on your resume, that is grounds for immediate dismissal. You won't be happy. Don't lie on your resume. But do put everything in your resume that's effective, and there are no rules. You can quote your past employers, and you can do all kinds of things that people don't think of. You can put logos from your post-secondary institution or from that great summer job that you had. There's no other rules other than what gets the employer's attention that's effective. Having said that, it is worth it to spend a few minutes tailoring your resume for each position. For sure, the cover letter, I'm going to show you a way that you can tailor even your resume briefly so that you're not knocking yourselves out, but you can at least spend a few minutes showing that you've bothered to read the posting and that your response is geared to their job. You're giving examples, you're giving numbers, you're giving projects, right? I'm amazed at how often people don't do that, and employers hate it. They often complain about you as the prospective employee that they're being too general, both on your resume and in your interview. And one of the areas that post-secondary students I find or recent grads fail to put is their project highlights. Like, why not put that fourth-year project, and why not get it out of the education system, the education section of your resume, and put it right in the experience section? I'm not telling you to pretend like it was a job. You can say that you got it at the University of Alberta or the University of Waterloo or wherever you got it, but it's experience. That research project or that development project or that marketing project or that engineering project is as close to real-life experience as most recent grads have. And relevant, I mean relevant experience, not to diminish any of your other part-time jobs, but relevant experience. Include that as an experience. Say that you got it at the University of Waterloo or wherever you got it, but then write it up as if it were a job. And I think you're going to find your employers are going to really like that. So a couple of more ideas. Be specific. Include the job title, who you reported to, scope of work. Make it great writing, active words, active voice. So that means, led 10 workshops with 200 participants is different than saying 200 workshops were facilitated by me. That's the passive voice. So you want to have active verbs that communicate what you did and your value. And then ultimately the visual presentation is the thing to think about. Easy to read, it's got some good white space, it's got easy to read fonts. I like the sans serif fonts like Arial and Helvetica better than I like stuff like Times New Roman. There's no rules about that. Consistent formatting. Here's something I see people do all the time is they have very messy formatting, especially with their dates. They put the dates on the left for education, but they put the dates on the right for experience. If you're going to use dates and employers are interested in dates, be consistent. It doesn't matter if they're on the left or the right. Just be consistent. Make them look the same. If you can make it less than 2 pages, if you can do the one-pager, great. That really shows that you've solved the one-page resume problem. Not everybody can do that. But don't sweat it. If it's 2 pages, it's 2 pages. If it's 1 1/4 pages, if it's 1 page and it has a little bit of stuff on page 2, isn't the employer going to think, gee, couldn't she figure out a way to make that all on 1 page? Like, couldn't she solve that little problem? So I'd say, make it either 1 page or 1.5 to 2 pages. But the 1 1/4 page begs the question, like, why couldn't you figure out how to solve that problem? So, a little bit on formatting. There are 3 different formats, and mostly what people have is a chronological format. That simply means that when you have the experience section in your resume, you're listing things in reverse time order, reverse chronological order. It's the most common. Employers like it the most. It's the simplest. Unless there's a compelling reason not to use it, go ahead and use it. Having said that, here's a good idea. Modified chronological simply means making 2 experience sections. So what do I mean by that? Let's say that you're looking for a marketing job and that you have 1 or 2 relevant marketing experiences. Maybe you did some marketing for an on-campus group, or maybe you had for a family business or something. But let's say that happened a few years ago, and you have more experience, newer, more recent experience, but it's less relevant. This is a problem loads of people have. So in this idea of having a modified chronological resume, for your experience, you have one section called relevant experience. You might even say relevant marketing experience. And I'm just going to share my screen with you for a resume of Juanita Smith. Name has been made up, but more or less a real resume. And I want you to see what she's done. She's got something called relevant communications experience. And what she can do in that is she can put her more relevant experience, even though it's not as recent, up ahead of other experience that she might have further down. And I think you'll see this further down. She's got a second section that she calls community and other employment experience. You might call it additional experience, right? So this is a really important idea for people who want to move up their more relevant experience, because employers do kind of place more emphasis on the higher the thing is in your resume, the more relevant it seems to be. So the first thing in your resume ought to be the most relevant, and this is a little approach or a tactic to get the most relevant to show up earlier in your resume. A functional resume, often called a skills-based resume, is one where you have different skills sections. Like you could say communication skills, and then you have a bunch of bullet points, and then you have analytical skills and a bunch of bullet points under there. And then behind that, you have a skeleton of your employment history, where you just put the job, the job title and where you worked. Employers do not like this. They simply don't. You can ask employers. I've asked hundreds of employers. They constantly say the same thing. They don't like it. So I'm not recommending it. Sometimes people use it because they don't feel like they have enough work experience. I find your average post-secondary graduate can take enough experience out of their degree or diploma that they can use one of the other 2 formats. The problem with it, and if you do have one of these resumes, I don't want you to have to, really start from the ground up, but the problem is that employers complain that they can't figure out where the bullet point about that communication skill comes from. So they don't want to just see communicated with 100 customers on a daily basis without knowing that it connects to that job that you had at Coast Hotels. That's the problem. And they distrust what they can't connect to an actual job. So I'd say try to stay away from the functional resume. If you have one, you can fix it as long as you make sure that the employer can figure out where the bullet point comes from.